Welcome to the Women Tech Council Student Innovator Mentorship Podcast Series. I'm Sarah Jones.
And I'm Sydney Tetro, and we are co-hosts of this show.
This show provides conversations with women mentors who came through STEM pathways and launched successful STEM careers. Hello, everyone. Today we have Dasha Kadulova here with us today, and I'm really excited because she is in a field that does not have a lot of women. So, and she's been incredibly successful, not only in this field, but in other areas of her life as well. Dasha, please, introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and what you love to do professionally.
Okay, so my name is Dasha Kadulova. I'm currently the Executive Director of Data Security at USANA Health Sciences. Been there for three and a half years. And my background is really in networking, infrastructure, and security. I've done a lot of work on the databases. And from a professional, from some of my interest, I was actually a ski racer.
That is amazing. Now, where did you hone your skiing skills? I'm just curious. Utah has the greatest snow on earth, but I mean, is this where you...
I actually learned when I came to America, and I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but I came from a refugee camp. I was there for 2.5 years and came to America to seek opportunities and have a better future for myself and family. And when I landed in Salt Lake City and I saw these beautiful mountains and the awesome snow, the next thing was I have to try go alpine skiing. I was a cross-country skier, and that was in the early 90s. And then when I heard that the Olympics are going to be in the 2002, I wanted to get a qualification for that and was competing mostly in the downhill and the Super G. So unfortunately, I tore my ligaments right before the knee ligaments before the Olympics, so I didn't get to compete.
Wow. So curious, was that your original career plan? Or, we're talking tech and Olympic skier, two totally different pathways. So how did that work for you in your life?
When I actually how that whole technology came, when I came to United States, I didn't speak any English, and I was actually attending Kearns High School. That's where I graduated from, and I had really, really good instructors. I didn't really understand them much because I didn't speak the language, but because I had other languages, other language skill set, such as German, I went to my German teacher, and they were translating my homework from German to English and back to my original language. So it got really, really complicated. But one of the instructors, they sat me behind a computer, and I remember it was a Mac. It was an Apple computer, and I had to type whatever pictures would come up, and I would have to type a cat or a dog, and I would start learning the English language based on from the technology side. And then I was more of I'm a curious person, so I was interested how I can type something on the keyboard, go over the wire into this box, and display it on the screen. So, curiosity. So I started digging into more, and then I think the instructors have noticed that I had more of a natural interest in the computers. So they were giving me more and more homework to do. So I spent a lot of time after the labs and started doing a lot of basic programming. And then from the programming, I started doing more programming, and eventually the instructor asked me if I was going to college. And my question, when I was learning more of the English language, and I said, am I allowed? As a woman coming into the United States, not only that I was like, wow, I am allowed to go to college. That's amazing. And I said, well, I don't have any money. And she said, why don't we apply for some kind of a scholarships? Because I was so into the computers. So she has helped me a lot with filling out all the paperwork. And I was granted a scholarship. It was a dean scholarship. It was fully paid for computer science. And that's how I ventured into my career. And it was really by accident because I came to the country, had to learn English. Computers came in front of me, and all of a sudden I was in that field. And the skiing was more of a hobby than anything, but it was just something that was a personal goal, right? You always have a professional goal, and I always have to have something personal for me. Mm-hmm. And I think making the Olympic team and making the downhill and the Super G, being on the Olympic team and coming down the hill and representing my former country, then that was something personally I wanted to accomplish.
Wow. And you actually were incredibly lucky as well because, that you went to school about the same time I did, and to have an instructor who wasn't even a computer science or programming instructor to pick up on the fact that you loved computers and to nurture that skill in your school setting and to, nudge you in that direction. That, if you think about how lucky you got to have an educator
Absolutely.
that could push you in that direction, because that's so needed now. We're hugely lacking, especially for the girls in our state, for them to be shown those pathways into a computer science degree.
Right. And I think I'm very thankful. And a lot of the high schools, they actually Kearns High School at that time, they didn't have an English second language program, so I had to be taking all the classes to be able to graduate. And I think that was actually a plus for me because I was really pushed to take those classes, and I had to learn. Maybe it took me twice as long, but I was able to communicate and speak in a year. And then a year later, I was able to actually attend the college and being in that degree. So I'm very thankful that the instructors helped me through that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to fast forward to where you are now. Tell us about a career highlight. When you look at, obviously you're not at the end of your career, but so far, what has been your career highlight?
That one is a tough one because, I've been in IT since 1991. I've been there before Windows 3.1 got released. I was before the internet. I built the first firewall in the early 90s, and I had a lot of passion for security in the early 90s when the internet came around, the firewalls. But I was also very passionate about storage and databases, and I did a lot of. I think one of the career highlights I had is I was really into database tuning and performance on high-performance databases. And I've done a lot. I've written a white paper, I think this is in maybe later, early 2000, in how to do database performance, Oracle database performance tuning on IBM AIX Unix operating system, where it was a very high transactional databases that we've struggled with some performance, and me digging into it I think it was for 3 months, because I knew that the systems could perform a lot better. And 3 months of probably 12, 13 hours a day digging into it, I was convinced I'm going to find it and tune it, and it's going to run a lot better. And I did. And I wrote a white paper about that because it was like a finding. I feel like I found a star, another star. But sometimes just digging into challenges that you can turn into opportunities. I think that's the best thing. And I've also worked in mining, and that was a really interesting career because when you work in an IT and you work in a city and you ask telecommunications to provide you a certain bandwidth of internet, or you need a WAN or whatever it may be, when you're mining and you're in the middle of nowhere in the mountains and you have to provide internet connectivity to 1,200 users or connectivity back on your WAN, on your local area network, you have to really think out of the box. How are you going to provide that if you barely have power, right? Mm-hmm. So that made me really think a little bit different about IT. How do we provide that? And you have to utilize the mountains for providing potential microwaves, getting your connectivity to your mine site. So that was definitely an interesting one as well. And today, I've migrated a little bit more into from the infrastructure side and networking. Now I'm full-time doing data security and cybersecurity and disaster recovery, and that landscape changes every day. Yeah. And I'm sure going into the future, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for all IT individuals to get into cybersecurity, because it's going to be such an important piece for any company to have data protection.
You have solved some really complex technology issues in your career, and you've done it as, in your industry, there's so few women doing what you're doing. What advice would you give to women who are going into cybersecurity or going into, network security or these really heavily technical roles? you did it and you were able to be heard, right? And you were able to get the problem solved and successfully do that. What advice would you give to women who are considering those careers?
I think for me, it's been over 20 years, and I've always there's always challenges as a female in a IT field, and, they'll say, oh, she's just a woman. She doesn't know, right? So you just have to be patient, and I think it's all about education and how much do you read, not just how much you learn in school, right? I read so many articles, so many white papers, and I make notes. I have notebooks, and you just have to, when somebody has a debate about certain technology, you have to listen, but you also have to provide your opinion, right? And why it matters, or why to do certain architecture this way versus that way, and what are the consequences if you do it this way. I think you really need to speak up, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because sometimes your questions, even though you may think your question might be stupid or silly, if you don't ask that question, it could potentially, that person that is making a decision could change that decision. So always ask people, always read what's happening on the blog, especially in the cybersecurity, as the landscape keeps changing on a daily basis. I read a couple blogs a day, just what's happening in the world, and you have to constantly be, educate yourself. And I think if you do that, then you can be heard from pretty much anybody, because you can provide the right decisions or the right opinions.
As a wrap up, I'd love for you. I'm going to switch this question on you, because I told you that it was going to be a different question. But actually, the future of cybersecurity, right? It needs, and I've been reading a lot more articles, it needs more women in that field. We actually can't successfully solve the problems that we're going to be facing globally without, more diverse thinking. So how would you pitch a career in cybersecurity to women in STEM who are listening to our show?
I think, if you're in an IT field, definitely cybersecurity is one of the top fields that we need to fill positions by 2020. I believe in 2020, there's going to be over 1.5 million jobs open. But to get into the cybersecurity, you have to understand how networks actually work. You need to understand VLANs and subnets and firewalls. You need to have the basic understanding how that operates. But if you're not into the true technical side, you can always do cybersecurity on the web application. There's always a need for, as we expand the internet and people write application, if it's for e-commerce or whatever it may be, there's going to be some security, right? There's a lot of, we have people put a lot of DNA into people's databases. We need to protect that data, and a lot of that will come even from the web application security. So you could concentrate on different pieces of cybersecurity. There's also the disaster recovery component that you don't necessarily may have to be that technical, but you have to drive a lot of projects and a lot of the initiatives to make sure whatever company you're working for, that you can replicate their systems and keep the business up and running. So I think with the cybersecurity, there's a lot of options you can do.
What's the cost of cybersecurity when it's not done well to a business?
It's a lot of money. I mean, data breaches happen pretty much all the time. We look at from the Target breach just recently, we have the Equifax breach, and just depending on, if you're processing credit card information and depending what kind of data you're storing, you have it, sometimes you can calculate it, it's about $400 per record. So if you have a lot of credit cards in your system, or you have a lot of personal information, or if you have personal health information, which is a little bit more regulated, then the cost of the breach is very, very big.
Wow. Well, Dasha, thank you for sharing your journey. You've had an incredibly interesting career and personal journey. Really appreciate you coming onto the show and giving us more insight into what it's like to be in cybersecurity and IT and your career.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to the Women Tech Council Student Innovators Mentorship podcast series. Go to www.womentechcouncil.org for more info and subscribe to our iTunes channel for access to our ongoing series.